Hey folks. So I had a kind of a big realization this morning, or recognition. I was sitting. We had a morning at the resort this morning to end my anniversary evening or weekend with Katie, which was beautiful. And I went outside and I was meditating, and for some reason I was inspired because I was outdoors to meditate with my eyes open, something that Madeline, my piano teacher, has encouraged in her when she's done meditations with us. It's always been eyes open, and I thought, oh, interesting. Well, I'm outside. Maybe I'll try an eyes open meditation. Cool. And the experience it was really interesting because I noticed like for a couple things. For one thing, my capacity to let go of the visual field. In other words, when my eyes are open, my eyes tend to be tracking something, focusing on something, grasping something, identifying. There's a whole process that's happening in the visual field that basically keeps me locked into my temporary identity. It keeps me locked into Robin. And so the exercise of actually keeping my eyes open and allowing the stimulus from my eyes to still be there, but not doing any of the habitual things that my mind does when my eyes are open, was really interesting. It took me a good little while. I mean, I sat there for probably, 40 minutes. And it wasn't until a good 20 minutes in that I started to feel like I could be eyes open and then still kind of let everything dissolve. And sometimes it would mean that like the whole visual field would go fuzzy, or my eyes would start to tear, or something would kind of like be bugging one of my eyes, and I would feel like I need to focus. The need to focus was really powerful, and just letting go of that need was really an interesting sensation. And it became this thing where there was almost like a tension between my infinite identity, just the consciousness, dipping into that frame that was devoid of attributes and simply present, and then being pulled back. Often it was by the visual field, pulled back to something I was looking at, something my eyes were latching onto. And so I really felt this sensation of like traveling between these two identities, like being in the open space, and then something would contract around and bring me back to my limited self sense. I really had that feeling of like traveling between an unbounded self and a limited self. So that in and of itself was a really interesting and kind of revelatory meditation experience. I'm definitely going to continue with that practice because clearly it reveals things that my other meditations haven't. But out of that tension between my limited self and my infinite self, and feeling the kind of tug of war between them, I also felt something. It's like I was able to identify something in my limited self, my ego, which is that on some level, my ego still thinks it can win. That was how the recognition appeared to me. My ego still thinks it can win. And I was like, interesting. Because no matter how deeply we intellectually know that our ego is the finite self, our ego is the part of us that's going to pass away, it's all the limitations. There's a level on which, it reminds me of it reminds me of Hafiz's poem where he talks about bargaining with God. And it's like, I forget the poem right now, but the sort of like message of it is you can't bargain with God. There's no, it's like we're haggling God. Oh, I remember, it's something like God is trying to give, all your troubles come down to this, he says. God is trying to give you something, and you are haggling over the price. That's the poem. God is trying to give you something, and you're haggling over the price. This haggling with God. And what I felt in that recognition of my ego still thinks it can win is that there's this part of me, the ego, that somehow thinks it's gonna make it through. It's like I don't have to fully surrender to the infinite because I might just squeak through the eye of the needle or something. I don't know. And it was a really interesting thing to clock because in some ways I think if there's, if what I'm involved in and what the path of genuine inner work, genuine spiritual work really is about, if that's about realization, self-realization, self with a capital S realization, realizing the true nature of the self as opposed to the limited and illusory nature of the self, then that ego hanging on for dear life and still believing it can win is really the only thing kind of standing between me and a whole other level of realization. What came through for me was, who could I be if I let that go? How? And it's like, so what came up was like, what do I need to see? Do I need to, if my ego thinks it can win, does that mean that it thinks if it becomes successful enough, it will have prevailed? That then the fear will be gone? Does it mean when it's attained a certain status or level of mastery? Because these are all the things that I kind of hold out in my awareness as the aspirations. And what I kind of clocked was, my ego thinks that when it gets there, it'll be ready to be self-realized. When I'm such and such successful, when I'm such and such of a master at whatever, then I'll be ready for self-realization. Then I'll be ready to let go. And it's a total lie. It's the way that the ego keeps hanging on. And in some way it's how it plays tug of war with the absolute. It's the ego's way of holding onto the rope and tugging. Is to say, well, one day when you get here, then you'll be able to let go. One day when you get here, you'll be free. You'll be able to set yourself free. And just seeing that was huge, because then I started to ask questions like, well, how much of the ego's illusion do I need to live before I simply recognize that it's an illusion? What level of success, what level of mastery, what level of the ego's aspirations do I need to realize before I see that it's an illusion? How long do I need to spend doing that? And what is my life in service of? What am I making my life in service of? Am I placing my life in service of those things? Or am I placing my life in service of the realization that is beyond those things that I already know to be true, that I already know to be reality. So it brought up a reckoning. It brought up a real reckoning. Because on some level, you know, and I'm sure that we've all had this experience, on some level it's like we know what's true. We know what we need to do. We know what is most important. And there's a particular type of conundrum whose sort of last frontier of the ego's battle is pretending I don't know what I want. Because if I don't know what I want, you can't pin me down. You know, the ego can duck and hide and maneuver and evade and abdicate responsibility. I'm not leading you anywhere because I don't even know where I'm going. So it's clearly not me that you're following, says the ego, all the while tugging. So it was a really beautiful recognition and a really kind of big thing to let in, to ask those questions. You know, who do I really want to be? What do I want to make my time on earth about? What am I placing that time on earth in service of? How much is that dictated by what my ego is throwing up there as like the projection, the promise of perfection? And how much am I making my life in service of the deepest possible reality, which always involves surrender and letting go of those aspirations, letting go of those attachments to status, to success, to blah, blah, blah. Even mastery. You know, there's like a highest level of mastery, which is to let go of mastery. It's the most subtle form of true mastery. So that's what came through today. Clearly a day at the spa was opened up some doors. Got a snake out of the deal, threshold moment, and some big things coming through. So thanks for listening, folks. Thanks for watching. By the way, always, anytime anyone wants to comment or respond to these videos, I'm always very interested to engage or have you question me or have you, respond to what I'm saying and make it a conversation. This is something that's very much coming out of me as something I'm looking for reflection on. So, just saying that. But I appreciate you all. So much love. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.